Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Al Arabiya News. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up on today's programme, we're going to be taking a look back at President Donald Trump's first 100 days in office, speaking to a panel of well-known figures on the US political landscape and asking them what sort of a report card they'd give the president. Hello and welcome to the programme. Today we are firmly focused on the United States as we assess the first 100 days of President Donald Trump's second term. Well, the president marked this milestone with a rally in Michigan last night, going into full campaign mode, touting his achievements and targeting his political foes. Here's a clip of what he said.
And we're here tonight in the heartland of our nation to celebrate the most successful first 100 days of any administration in the history of our country, and that's according to many, many people. You know, we had a group of radical left guys who were very smart, and a woman, a particular woman. Very, very smart people. These are not stupid people. These are sick people, but they're not stupid people. We will cut more than $1 trillion in wasteful and unnecessary spending, and in the next fiscal year, it'll all be done. We're going to have something that you won't even believe. We will end inflation, slash prices. We've already ended inflation, raise wages, and give you the greatest economy in the history of the world. That's already happening.
President Trump speaking there in Michigan. Well, there were plenty of celebratory moments at that rally. Let's take a look at some of them. Well, let's hear more now. We can speak to Sarah Palin, the former governor of Alaska. She also ran to be vice president of the United States in 2008 for the Republican Party. She joins us now from Alaska. Sarah, it's a real pleasure to have you back with us here on Al Arabiya News. We had a great conversation about 3 months ago. We've been looking at President Donald Trump there in Michigan, touting what he says were perhaps the most successful 100 first days of a presidency in the history he's had of the United States. And he says a lot of people think that. I want to ask you first, are you one of them?
I am. This is a president who is governing as he campaigned, and that's really rare in a politician that they would fulfill promises. I don't know why anybody's shocked with what he is doing, because he said all along in his campaign, he said for the last 12 years that he was going to do X, Y, and Z, and that's what he's doing. And the majority of Americans truly are pleased with this stoppage of a fundamental transformation of America that the left wanted to do. Big picture, it's going to take a lot more than 100 days, but Donald Trump is trying to fundamentally restore what is good and prosperous and safe about America.
He chose Detroit, the heart of the auto industry, as his choice of venue for that rally last night. What was the significance of that? What do you think was the reasoning behind that choice?
I love that choice. I was just listening to an interview with Ted Nugent, a rock star over here. You guys should get him on your show. He's from Michigan, and he was talking about Michigan just being the kind of the cornerstone of industry historically in America, and yet it was stripped away. That industry was stripped away from them because of policies of our government. So Donald Trump chose Michigan, Detroit specifically, which was the auto industry capital of the world, and let people know symbolically that we are back. We are going to incentivize industry, manufacturing to come back to America, which will create jobs for Americans. And that, of course, gives purpose to every worker. It gives prosperity collectively to our nation. It makes us safer. It makes us more voluntarily be generous with other countries, within our own country. It's nothing but good stuff.
It's been about 100 days. I mean, no coincidence, since that's what we're talking about, the first 100 days of President Trump's presidency. But it's been about 100 days since we last spoke. And you said to us that if President Trump's administration rang you up and offered you a role, you'd probably take it. Have you had that phone call?
I have not had that phone call. I don't know if I had mentioned back then either, though. The GOP, the machine, the hierarchy of the GOP, they don't look real kindly on me because I duke it out with them. I've held them to account also, as I do to the left, because I'm for the people. So no, they haven't called. But remember too, I couldn't even get credentialed to go to our GOP convention, nor the inauguration or anything else. So, and that's fine because I don't let obsessive partisanship get in the way of just doing what's right for the people.
But would you still take a job in the administration were one to be offered to you?
I would, because, I think public service, there's no higher calling other than being a good parent and having, working hard for your family is serving your fellow man. And I would love to do that on a national level. First, let me mention, though, about this whole 100-day thing. Since when has it become such a big darn holiday-ish deal? Last night, I had 4 of my 5 kids over for dinner with their spouses and partners. They were just sitting right back there. And I was talking about the first 100 days of Trump because the media is making such a big deal out of it, like it is basically a holiday all of a sudden. And like so much with this starting or standing point of 100 days, so much should have been done is what is kind of the collective narrative out there. And my kids were all saying, so what? It's 100 days. How do you undo decades of this uniparty, this globalism transformation of America application? How do you stop all that in just 100 days? What my kids wanted to talk about, and this is even unprovoked, and I think that they represent a good demographic, which is a good sounding board. They wanted to talk about jobs for Americans. They certainly want to talk about industry coming back to America and what Trump is doing to incentivize that. A lot of that has to do with tariffs. And it was just a really insightful conversation because they didn't care about all the stuff that the media is hyping. They cared about what affects them personally and their own families. And so much of that has to do with jobs.
Well, I'd love to have been a fly on the wall during that conversation, Sarah. But I mean, you're right. 100 days is not very long. It's 3 months. And, a lot of people don't get very much done in 3 months. So perhaps we shouldn't expect it. But then President Trump himself held this big rally to mark the milestone. So here we are talking about it. Let's talk about some of the key issues he's been tackling in these first 100 days. Let's look at immigration first. What's your thinking? How's he been doing with regards to immigration? How's he been doing with regards to border security?
Border security, A+. He's been doing a great job there. He was committed to securing America physically even, and that was closing our borders, and he's done that. We haven't seen the mass deportations that were promised, so that's interesting. And maybe it's time we can get into talking about what hasn't been done that needs to get done beyond the first 100 days. But with immigration, he's doing exactly what he promised, and I do believe that the vast majority of Americans are pleased with that.
Let me just pick you up on that, because, I did expect you to say nice things about President Trump, and you've told us before you're quite aligned to his way of thinking and many of his policies. Is there anything you haven't liked so far? And then we'll get back to immigration.
Yeah, he has surrounded himself with a few people who made these overreaching promises about what was going to happen once they were appointed to positions, and they haven't done it, and that's kind of disappointing. And we just need to hold them accountable too, because they give politicians kind of a bad name by making promises that they have opportunity to fulfill, to keep the promises, and yet they don't. Much of that has to do with corruption, with scandals, where there's proof of scandalous actions taken by individuals. Now, finally, the right side of the aisle, the GOP, they're in a position to do something about it as bureaucrats, as officials, as politicians, and they don't do anything about it. We haven't seen any arrests that were promised. We haven't seen, like, the Epstein files. We haven't seen so much of the scandals being solved and being eradicated from our country. So promises that were made that aren't being kept, that's a bit disappointing. But two, Donald Trump has so many people to appoint and so many people around him that not all of them are 100% trustworthy, and I certainly see that because I know some of them.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah, you're telling us there, I mean, just reading between the lines, there are a couple of people you're a bit worried about in this administration, perhaps in the inner sanctum of the president. Any names spring to mind?
I won't name any names, but the positions that they hold are positions of great authority that can't be abused, but authority that needs to be taken to hold the corrupt people, hold them accountable. And, the left in America, certainly, the left media, they want to make the GOP, the right side, Donald Trump, look so bad. And I think, how you can make us look really bad is, why doesn't the left media, why don't they expose so much corruption and scandals and then ask, hey, GOP, hey, Trump administration, why aren't you doing something about that? That's what would make us look bad. I'm just going to give them a little bit of advice on how to be more effective in their agenda. But both the left and the right side of the aisle, when it comes to media, needs to hold politicians and bureaucrats accountable when they make promises to eradicate corruption, scandals, and finally get in a position of power to do so. And yet, too often we don't do it.
Okay, let's go back to immigration. Fox News polls suggesting that 55% of people asked do approve of what President Trump is doing on the border. Clearly he's getting that right. We've got US troops there on the US-Mexico border. I mean, what results are we seeing out of all of this?
Well, I think we're going to see safer communities. There's been some high-profile examples of some really bad guys being detained and deported, and that, is indicative of what the agenda is here, and that is to make our country safer. So in that respect, again, and I think 55%, I'd say it's a much higher majority, a much higher percentage of people are certainly pleased with Donald Trump's agenda on that end.
What more would you like to see happen with regards to immigration, border issues?
Well, he's doing exactly what he promised to do. So I'm pleased with that. I think people are pleased with that. There were promises of a lot of deportation of people who are here illegally. And there's this argument, they need greater due process, or even more of a due process, if you will, that sides with the illegal aliens who are here. And I say, hey, if they didn't follow the rules, if they broke the law to get here, then what's the problem with sending them back home, regardless of what this bureaucratic process actually is to get them back home? They purposefully broke the law to come to America. They were enticed, though, by the Biden administration and Obama before that with these incentives of, hey, come on over to America and you're going to get all this free stuff. The people working in America and paying income tax, they're going to pay for all of your stuff, so come on over. Well, a lot of 10 million plus came on over. And now it's time to say, no, you broke the law. You got to go back. If you want to come back into America, right on. We want you here if you're good people who will work hard and assimilate into culture. But if you're intent on continuing to break the law, you're not welcome here. We are a land of law, rule, and order. That's civilization, and that is certainly what we want.
Okay, under the heading of immigration issues, perhaps we could put things like the Alien Enemies Act, perhaps we could put things like birthright citizenship. Do either of those two issues make you feel uncomfortable at all?
No, again, President Trump and his folks around him who are dealing with immigration, they're working on all that. They're dealing with all that. But so much of what's going on is just following existing law, Tom, and that brings us to Congress. The GOP is leading in Congress, and yet they're on vacation quite often, which is unprecedented, the amount of time that they're essentially taking off in a new administration's time in office. And that's unfortunate because, again, the GOP has opportunity to really turn things around. If they're unhappy with the birthright citizenship laws, for instance, or any of the immigration laws, they are the ones, we have three equal branches of government. It is the legislative branch that is supposed to be working on the laws that would allow for a safer country. And yet the GOP in a myriad of ways, a myriad of issues, they're absent, and they're sitting back, allowing Donald Trump to get the crap beat out of him by the media for doing what he promised to do. It's like a quarterback without having a line of defense helping him out, protecting him so that he can do his job, so that we can win the game. It's really unfortunate that the GOP Congress is sitting back, just watching, going like this, testing the political winds to see which way it's going to blow. And they'll step up and they'll protect and defend Donald Trump if it looks like the political winds are in his favor on something. But man, it just ticks me off, and a whole lot of other Americans, that the GOP Congress is sitting back on its heels watching Donald Trump do what he promised to do, but again, getting the crap beat out of him for doing it.
Let's move on to the economy. Some people worried about a recession in the United States. President Trump pledged to bring down consumer prices and boost the economy. How's he getting on?
Well, first 100 days is impossible to, eradicate inflation that was caused by President Biden's policy. That's another thing that my kids and their friends last night were talking about, was, of course, the economy, because they're talking about jobs. They're talking about the tariffs, why this idea of reciprocal tariffs now that Donald Trump has applied in the economy worldwide, why it's such a negative narrative with the leftist media, when the key word here is reciprocal. We're doing to other countries what they did to us in order to incentivize our manufacturing, our industry overseas to their countries. Now, we're doing that to them to reverse that, to bring back the industry, bring back the manufacturing, to create those jobs. So economically, Donald Trump is doing what he promised to do. It's just going to take a while to get a handle on inflation because of previous policy.
So you support, you would say, continued tariffs in the United States?
Absolutely. The key word, again, is reciprocal. All these other countries, people are not aware, evidently, how they have applied tariffs and levied tariffs on us, and yet we've kind of gotten ripped off, if you will, that we haven't done that to them. Now we are, to bring to light the way that an international economy works, for one, but also to bring to light opportunity that we have now to allow industry to come on back. Tariffs will apply to things like when we're talking about China, Chinese-made items. That's what a tariff note. Amazon now evidently is going to let their customers know what the amount of a tariff is applied to a product that we buy, that we order through Amazon. Mostly China-made items are what we order. And when we note then what the tariff amount is, right there is that red flag that says this item was made in China. And if we are going to be preaching and living out this mantra of American made, we need to support the mom and pop industry of America by buying American products. Well, we're going to know what's made in America, what's made in China, thanks to what the tariff note is going to be applied to the product.
And yet, it seems like a lot of people are worried about this issue of tariffs right across the political spectrum in the United States. I mean, one poll I've got here, a Washington Post, ABC News Ipsos poll, says that 64% of Americans disapprove of President Trump's policies on tariffs, to 34% that approve. And a lot of them are presumably Republicans. I mean, why do you think that is?
Because the media's narrative is so absolutely negative and one-sided when it comes to even educating the public on tariffs. And that is a poll by Washington Post and ABC. Polls they're really good for strippers and they're really good for cross-country skiers. But polls like that, you have to consider what the demographic is, how the question was asked. I think that no, it's not 64%. A lot of those being Republicans are worried about what the tariffs are actually going to do. But if they do read on into and believe what the narrative is in the media, then perhaps they're more concerned than I give them credit for.
All right, let's talk a little bit about foreign policy. Gaza and Ukraine wars rumble on, people dying every day. I mean, extremely tragic situations. And President Trump, to be fair, has done a lot. I mean, he's been extremely energized, got a lot of people around a lot of conference tables in a lot of different cities around the world these last 100 days. Why don't you think there's been an outcome or a result? Why haven't these wars been brought to a conclusion?
Okay, well, that brings me back to what hasn't been done, that was promised but hasn't been done. I think President Trump used, well, it was rhetorical, I believe, when he said that within his first 24 hours, he was going to end that Russian-Ukraine war. Well, obviously that hasn't been done, but I think it was kind of a symbolic message that he was giving there. President Trump hates war. I hate war. The GOP should be the party of anti-war. I kind of feel like the Cindy Sheehan of the GOP. She was a woman years ago under the George Bush administration who was known for fighting so hard within her own country, within America, to get people to realize how useless American involvement in foreign wars actually is. And we send our sons and our daughters over to die for causes that we should not be involved in. Well, the Russian-Ukrainian war is one where we're going to get to the point of saying, we're going to wash our hands of this. Russia, Ukraine, you guys duke it out. You guys figure this out. President Trump has been trying to help, not just this 100 days, but for years before this, to try to tamp down, turn down that volume on the conflict over there. We are spending so much money. Look how much money unaccounted for that has gone over to Ukraine. And then we realize too late, though some of us knew from the beginning, Ukraine, that's a corrupt administration wasting our money that we're sending over there. Well, at some point, I think Donald Trump has already said it even. He's like, there's only so much that he can do to get these administrations in both their countries to sit down and figure it out and quit allowing innocent lives to be lost.
Sure. And I mean, in the process, President Trump has been quite harsh on quite a lot of America's traditional allies, not least President Zelensky of Ukraine, who had that showdown in the Oval Office. I don't know if that stands out for you as having been one of the most memorable.
Zelensky is corrupt. Zelensky is corrupt.
Why is he corrupt?
He is corrupt because look at all the dollars. He's in charge of everything. He's the big dog, right? The billions, hundreds of billions of dollars that we are spending on their cause that he has asked for. In fact, he's demanded even more. That money is unaccountable for. Ukraine was considered the third most corrupt administration country in the world before we even got enmeshed in this war, in this skirmish. And I think that it remains the same as absolutely corrupt. And indicative of that is that lack of accountability. Where has all the money gone? Why is there still demand from Zelensky to demand that we give more and more and more? That is a sign of corruption and things that are amiss. Again, our Congress, though, needs to step up and speak more boldly and aggressively about holding to account where American tax dollars are going over there. And yeah, again, Donald Trump, he's committed to seeing the war end. I wonder, too, at this point, though, how much more he can do.
Do you think Ukraine should give up its territory, and Crimea in particular? I mean, it was invaded, to be fair, on the Ukrainians, and now they're going to have to give up territory. What do you think about that?
Well, Putin and Zelensky are going to have to work that out, of course. And much of this, we have to remember, Tom, is not in America's interest. We need to concentrate on what the heck is going on in our own country that is bankrupting America. We are not going to be sovereign. We are not going to be secure if we keep going down the road that the Biden and before that the Obama administration put us on when they wanted to transform America. They didn't mind that we were going to be bankrupt. They did not mind that our unsustainable debt that is incurred every year, that would so adversely affect our economy and our kids' future. Well, the two countries that are fighting over there, overseas, it's horrible. It's bad because innocent lives are being lost. And America is that beacon of hope. We're supposed to be the light. We're supposed to be an example that other countries would wish to emulate. So in that respect, we do have interests over there. But when it comes to America's own economic and security interests, no, we need to concentrate and spend our money here in America and clean it up.
Okay, talking about cleaning up expenditure in the United States, I want to ask you about the cost-cutting efforts by, in particular, the government, or the Department of Government Efficiency, Doge. How do you rate their successes?
Well, I rate an A+ when it comes to exposure of wasted dollars. I love the examples that they've been able to share with Americans so that more Americans are aware of that unaccountability when it comes to where their income tax dollars are going. So much is wasted, and there's so much pay-to-play politics going on in Washington, D.C. That's scandalous. So I love that. But there's also a discrepancy, though, in what Elon Musk has promised and said, you know, that it would be trillions of dollars saved. And then at least the media is reporting, no, it's only been, you know, a couple $100 billion that have been saved. Once all of that is exposed, what the actual outcome is with Doge's with their attempts to cut the waste and the corruption, then we'll be able to better judge that. It's funny, though, that the left, that the Democrats are freaking out about even exposure of corruption and wasted tax dollars. You know, you'd think that they would, why not join forces on this one issue, left side of the aisle? Come on, who can be against stopping the waste, the fraud that we know that goes on a national level? Hey, another thing that's good about what Doge is doing when they expose where the corruption, where the wasted dollars are, that then trickles on down to a state and a local government. Their ears are open to what's going on a national level, and that should incentivize them and energize them to, on a state and a local level, make sure that their constituents' tax dollars are being spent wisely and not wasted. Because on a local level, a lot of dollars are wasted.
Okay, so it sounds like you think with regards to government reforms, government efficiency, a little too early to judge. We'll ask you for your grade in just a moment. Just like to ask you, when we spoke in January, you told us that woke culture is out of control in the United States. Just wondering how you think President Trump has fared when it comes to tackling this issue.
He's done very well because he's allowed people who are affected by the woke culture to speak up, to expose what the problem is and to do something about it, like take Riley Gaines. She's the famous swimmer who was defeated in a very important race by a male swimmer. She's female, and it was a woman's race. The guy wins, and then she kind of brought to light what part of the woke culture that had embraced such a thing, what the problem is with, in this instance, men competing in women's sports. That's part of the woke culture. And Donald Trump allowed Riley Gaines to get out there and speak about it. Laws then finally were adhered to. Title IX was addressed, and that has to do with women in sports being able to compete against women. So an issue like that brought to light, that gives Trump an A+ on the wokeism, and that's just one example.
So overall, I mean, the general direction in the United States is heading in, and the way the United States is perceived on the world stage. I mean, are you liking everything you've seen and heard these last 101 days?
I love the general direction that we're going in. Absolutely. The trajectory that we were on, Tom, it was downhill. America was going downhill, and the rest of the world can't afford for America to fail. We do need to be the leader, I believe, on the international stage. We are such a blessed country with wonderful resources, a wonderful workforce, geographically, geologically, everything about our country, it's good. It's founded on Judeo-Christian principles. It's supposed to be founded on the 10 Commandments and a promise to do right, so that we could be an example for other countries, and so that we could be prosperous enough where we could voluntarily be generous to help others, help constituents within, but also help others. So the general direction that ended that downhill trajectory, I'm very pleased with.
OK, let's go to the report card now, Principal Palin. Donald Trump, been in office 101 days. You've said A+ for immigration. What are you giving him on the economy?
Well, I'm giving an A on the direction, but we need to keep in mind how long it's going to take to undo the Biden policies that put us on that downhill trajectory economically.
OK, foreign policy.
A.
B?
Because he does not want war, and for me personally and politically, I do not want war. So all that he is doing to put America in a position to do whatever we can to stop wars, I'm giving an A.
OK, it's gone from a B to an A. And lastly, government reform.
Oh, no. We need a smaller, smarter government. We don't see smaller government yet. So, man, that's a tough one. Principal Palin here, I'm not going to give any A. That's not Trump, though. We have three branches of government. We have the judicial, and we see a lot of leftist judges that are being activists instead of just ruling according to law. That's one branch of government. We see the legislative branch that's sitting on its butt, not doing enough to reform government. And then we have the administrative branch that's doing a heck of a job trying to reform government. But since the three branches are not working together to abide by our Constitution and rule of law, I can't give it an A or a B or a C, and I'll leave it at that.
OK, it sounds like the average is on the high side anyway. I think you're erring towards an A for the all-round performance of this administration. Am I right?
I am. But, when I say that, too, I'm talking about the direction now of America. I'm not talking about individuals, because I'm not, I know that every individual, I will not put my faith in man. Man is fallible. Man makes mistakes. I am not one who is obsessed with a personality, whether it's Trump or anybody else, and that, I'm just going to bow down and praise the person for who they are, or for what, because other politicians would do this, for what they want to get out of the opportunity or the person. I'm not one like that. I'm going to judge President Trump and everybody else on their actions and on their character manifested in their actions. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm just obsessed with any one person who's happening to lead the country or anywhere else.
OK, well, you've been a very objective principal. Sarah Palin, former governor of Alaska, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Always a pleasure talking to us. I hope we'll speak again soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, let's get more now, and we can speak to someone who knows President Trump very well indeed. Mick Mulvaney is the former chief of staff to President Donald Trump, who served in the first term, joining us now from Washington, D.C. Mick, great to have you with us once again here on Al Arabiya News. President Trump in Michigan last night said that this has been the most successful 100 days of any administration in the history of the United States. And that, he said, was according to many, many people. Are you one of them?
Yeah, no. I'm sure it's not the first time that Trump has engaged in that type of superlative. And I'm sure the people around him are telling him that it's been a fantastic first 100 days. He's had some successes, there's no question about it. But they've had some disappointments and some near failures as well. So it's been a good 100 first days. Not sure it's the greatest ever in history, but I'm not really sure how you would measure that even if you wanted to.
Yeah, and 100 days is not really that long, is it? With pretty ambitious plans, a lot of issues that need addressing, some of them historic, dating back decades, for example, the war in Gaza. But let's perhaps look at approval numbers. What do the approval numbers and the polls tell us about how Americans are feeling about the president?
Trending in the wrong direction right now. Not that approval ratings matter that much for a term-limited president. We can talk later about whether or not he really is considering running for a third term. I assume that he is not. But approval ratings really don't matter if you are term limited and cannot run for office again. But it certainly does give some insight into the sentiment of the country. And right now, those numbers are trending in the wrong way for the Trump administration. The tariffs were not well received either by the markets, by our trading partners overseas, or more importantly, by people who live in this country. So the Trump administration has some work to do there. He just put out a tweet this morning, once again encouraging patience on the economy. But Tom, usually in this country, as with many countries, the sentiment regarding the governmental leadership depends in large part on the economy. And the economy does seem to be trending in the wrong direction right now. It doesn't surprise me that the approval ratings are moving in lockstep with that.
Okay, so you're not sounding overwhelmed with these first 100 days. Knowing the internal workings of this administration better than anyone else we could possibly ask, how do you think the internal morale is in the sort of the Trump inner sanctum?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of, I'm neither excited or disappointed because I recognize exactly what you just said. It's 100 days, which is just over a little bit of 3 months into a 48-month presidency. But if your question is what's the attitude in the building, it's probably pretty good. Listen, it's never easy to tell the President of the United States, any president of the United States, bad news. And that's especially true, I think, with Donald Trump. And my guess is the folks that are around him are giving him the good news and probably not giving him the other side of things. That could be dangerous in the long run. It's not necessarily a problem, again, for the first 100 days. But you do hope that the president is getting good and honest information from his inner circle of advisors. Now, that being said, even if Donald Trump was getting all of the news, the good, the bad, and the ugly together, I would still expect him to be publicly very positive, very optimistic. Keep in mind, that's just how Trump is. He believes in the power of positive thinking, and very, very rarely would you hear him speak publicly about things that could go wrong or had gone wrong.
You mentioned that there won't be a third term, but there was a bit of Trump 2028 merchandise doing the rounds in Michigan yesterday. I mean, that idea doesn't seem to be entirely off the table, does it?
From a constitutional standpoint, from a legal standpoint, it is. I think one of the things that's lost overseas, in fact, it's lost here a good bit, is that those hats are being sold by the Trump Organization. That is the private, for-profit family business of the Trump family. It is not the campaign. They're selling the hats to make money. They're selling the merchandise to make money. I think that's probably what's driving this more than anything else. I honestly don't think that Trump is running for a third term. I think he floats the idea because it drives the left in this country absolutely crazy, and he enjoys watching that, as many of us do, as they have this apoplectic response to his possible third term. There are some people, Tom, in his inner circle that I think would probably like to see him run for a third term. Steve Bannon, for example, who I've always considered sort of an anarchist, would love to see the chaos that would come from a floated Trump third term. But I think that's a small minority right now within both the party and even within the Trump circles themselves. So I think it's much ado about nothing for right now. I think it's more making money than anything else.
Okay, so he's having a bit of fun, perhaps, at keeping everyone guessing as to his intentions for 2028. So we've agreed 100 days isn't a very long period of time, and even President Trump last night alluded to that, saying, "We're just getting started. You haven't seen anything yet," he says. But from what we have seen, and you've mentioned one or two things where you think perhaps he's fallen a bit short on expectations, what's he got right?
Oh, immigration. I think first and foremost, and you heard him talk about that a good bit last night. There was a reason for that immigration took so much time and attention during that rally, with that speech last night. He really has changed the attitude, Tom, here in this country almost overnight. It's honestly quite surprising he's been able to do as much as he has on immigration in the first 100 days. And sort of bespeaks the weakness the Biden administration had before, saying they couldn't do anything without legislation from Congress. Well, Trump has proven that wrong in the first 100 days. The border crossing numbers are down. The deportation numbers are fairly up. But more importantly, the attitude has changed. The message has gone out to especially Latin America, that we are no longer going to tolerate this level of illegal immigration. And that has sort of set expectations, and that's what keeps people from trying to cross into the country in the first place. Yes, there have been criticisms, some of them well-founded, around the manner and the method that the Trump administration has been using to get to where we are. And I think that bears further consideration. But generally speaking, immigration has been a huge success here. And if you break down those approval numbers, even people who do not approve of his methods overwhelmingly support the change in attitude of our government towards illegal immigration.
Yeah, indeed. One Fox News poll is 55% in favour, 40% not in favour when it comes to border security and this administration. So he's clearly winning in that respect. There are some controversial issues that sort of come under the umbrella of immigration. I don't know if you agree. I mean, for example, the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 being used to deport suspected gang members. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, every time people mention that the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, they put a great deal of reference on 1798. Oh my goodness gracious, it's more than 200 years ago. Our Constitution is actually from 1789. So just the passage of time doesn't make that law any less relevant. Now, I think there is a good question that's now, I think it's moving towards our Supreme Court as to whether or not that act can be invoked outside of times of war. This, by the way, for those who aren't familiar, this is the act on which President Trump is basing most of his actions to sort of stem illegal immigration. It was last used during World War II for the Japanese internment camps. I don't believe it's ever been used outside of a time of war. So there's a fair constitutional legal question as to whether or not that law is applicable today in a relative time of peace. But just because it's from the late 18th century doesn't mean it's no longer viable. It is going to be a continued focus, I think, of the Trump administration and of the courts, and to be curious to see how it turns out.
Okay, another thing that's in the Constitution is birthright citizenship. President Trump would like to have that curtailed. Federal judges have been getting in the way there. This could end up, couldn't it, in the Supreme Court? And if it does, which way do you think it would go?
Yeah, I got to think this is a tough win for the Trump administration. I cannot imagine that they would be able to change birthright citizenship. They're trying to focus on some ambiguity in the language and so forth as to the rights to citizenship based on birthright, and that's fine. But if I was trying to be objective, I think this is probably one of the weaker cases that the Trump team is bringing to the Supreme Court. I think that, for example, they have much more leverage, much more argument in favor of their position on the Enemies Alien Act of 1789 than they do on unilaterally changing birthright citizenship.
Okay, just to wrap up this discussion on immigration before we move on to some other topics. I mean, do you think that given the successes and those border crossings being down, deportations up, arrests up, do you think that perhaps to some extent, this being such an important issue on the campaign trail, President Trump has managed to win over perhaps some of the support of people who didn't vote for him in November last year?
Yes and no. Again, immigration was an important topic in the last election, and that's fine. That's fair, and I think Trump has done an excellent job on that. Again, he's not running for re-election, so how people think about him really isn't as relevant as it would be in a first term. But really, I don't think, Tom, that immigration trumps the economy. You can be really, really happy about illegal immigrants not coming into the country or being deported if they're here, especially violent illegal immigrants, criminals, and so forth. But if your household economy is not doing very well, if you're worried about your job, if you're worried about the cost of things, then no amount of successes in immigration are going to make you feel really, really good about your status in life. So, as is so often the case, and famously quoted in the 1990s by a political analyst here, worked for Bill Clinton, it's the economy, stupid. That really is what drives approval ratings. And my guess is that the sentiment here will rise and fall with the economy.
Now, moving on to the economy, I mean, 72% of Americans, according to one poll I've seen, 51% of them being Republican, so a fairly balanced sample, think that it is somewhat likely that President Trump's economic policies will lead to a recession. Is a recession on the cards, do you think?
Yeah, in fact, I think the GDP numbers just came out today, and the GDP shrank in the last quarter. 2 quarters in a row would be considered a recession. So we're certainly on the brink of that. I think it's a fair concern. The Trump team has sort of gone from, oh, there's no worry about a recession. That was their position a couple of weeks ago to there might be one, but just be patient. Again, he tweeted out this morning, encouraging people to be patient on the economy to allow his plans to kick in. That's not only the tariff plan, Tom, and the trade deals that supposedly will come from that. None of them have yet. But also the debate that we'll be having starting right now in Washington, D.C. about the tax policies moving forward. Trump is counting heavily on his economic agenda for the tax reduction extensions before the end of the year. So he is encouraging patience. That's a little bit of a different message from the Trump team. Again, from the last couple of weeks, it was always nothing to worry about, nothing to see here, to, well, maybe there is something to see here, but it's going to be very short term. And in the long term, things are going to be much better. So you do get a sense that the attitude, even within the White House, has changed slightly.
Yeah, I mean, can the US afford tax cuts? I mean, when you look at the size of the federal budget deficit, I mean, can the US coffers deal with those 2017 tax cuts becoming permanent? What do you think?
Yeah, you can if you reduce spending. Look, there's two ways to close a deficit, to pay off the debt. There's two ways to do that. Either you increase government revenues or you decrease government spending. Tax cuts generally in the short term tend to lower revenues. Now, this wouldn't be a real tax cut. It would simply be the extension of the tax rates as they are now. I know that's a little bit confusing, but the tax cuts for 2017 are due to expire, which means that if Congress does nothing, taxes will go up. So the extension is really just leaving the tax rates where they are on a longer basis. But yes, that will continue to drive a debt unless you reduce spending. And that's going to be the fight here in Washington, D.C. This summer. Is it easier to raise taxes or is it easier to cut spending? And that is going to be quite the battle.
Fair to say that when it comes to economic policy, fiscal policy, trade policy, tariffs have been the most divisive, perhaps the most controversial issue, even in the ranks of Republicans?
I think it's absolutely fair. Half a generation ago, the Republicans were the party of free trade and Democrats were the party of high tariffs and protective economic policies. And Donald Trump has turned that on its ear. So, yeah, no, that is at the heart of the debate right now is how effective are these tariffs? What's the purpose of these tariffs? I think that's a question, Tom, that the White House is still struggling with a little bit. Were the tariffs there for the sake of rebuilding the American manufacturing base, which would imply that the tariffs would stay permanently? Or were the tariffs there as leverage for negotiating better trade deals with our partners overseas? I think that latter perspective is sort of ascendant right now in the White House, but it's not entirely clear. And that confusion, are the tariffs going to be there forever, or could they go away if we get a free trade deal with, say, Japan or Korea, Australia, the UK? That lack of clarity out of the White House has contributed to the uncertainty, which has contributed to the market gyrations that we've seen, the pullback on investment and spending that we've seen, and as a direct result of that, the reduction in GDP that we just saw today in the last quarter.
Let's talk about the cost-cutting efforts that you alluded to just a moment ago. Those efforts being led, of course, by Elon Musk, who we understand is going to be stepping away somewhat from his Doge role. A little bit chaotic in some sense, in terms of deciphering and decrypting where we are with the cost-cutting effort. For example, experts in food safety and nuclear weaponry got fired. Now then they were put back in their jobs because they were fired mistakenly. But in terms of the deliverables and the savings, we're not quite at the $2 trillion cut in the federal budget, are we?
Oh, listen, we could talk about this for an hour. Keep in mind, I was the last person responsible for government efficiency, and I wasn't able to pull it off simply because there was no interest in Washington or interest in the broader country in being more efficient in the way the government operated. I think that's the one thing that Elon Musk has changed at his Doge group, which is to sort of make this a popular topic. He sort of made it interesting to people. People are now following government efficiency and they care about it. And that has been positive. I don't think you're going to see the savings that Elon Musk talked about. I've said this for several months. Again, having done this myself before, there was never any way for him to be able to save $2 trillion or even $1 trillion. That's not how our system works. If you come from the outside, you might think, oh my goodness, this is going to be easy. I've said from the very beginning, Tom, by the time he's finished here, Elon Musk will realize that it's easier to get to Mars than it is to reduce spending in Washington, D.C. And I think he's experiencing that now firsthand. They have done some tremendous work. Yes, it's been chaotic, to use that term, but keep in mind, Washington has never focused on efficiency before, never reduced spending before. So chaos comes from, simply not knowing how to do it. So they're sort of learning on the job, and I have a high tolerance for that. That doesn't bother me. Are there going to be mistakes made? Yes, they are. But again, they're doing something that the government has not tried to do, at least in my lifetime. I'm not sure how successful it's going to be in the long term. Keep in mind, under the American system, Congress appropriates, spends the money. The executive branch sort of makes sure the money goes where Congress wants it to go. But it's very, very difficult for any White House, even with Doge and Elon Musk, to reduce spending unilaterally. That has to be done in Congress. That is part of the tax battle we talked about just a few minutes ago. Will the Congress be able to reduce spending? Because Doge won't be able to do it all by itself, as I think they're learning firsthand.
And if Elon Musk sort of steps into the shadows, as he said he wouldn't, in fact, he had to, because he only had a mandate of 130 days, I believe, to be in that particular advisory role. I mean, what sort of an influence do you think he's had? And will that influence be missed by this administration?
That's a great question, because he brought brand recognition. He brought sort of that his individual fame to this effort. And I'll be very curious to see if the next person who's in charge, by the way, who is my successor, a gentleman whose name nobody knows, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, who will now be left to try and do this because Doge is part of his Office of Management and Budget, and whether or not there's a sort of a honeymoon period where Elon is no longer there on a day-to-day basis, but he still sort of has that charisma and his personal reputation attached to it that they can leverage for additional savings, remains to be seen. I think it will be difficult to maintain the level of interest in government efficiency when Elon Musk is gone, but we'll know relatively quickly, because I think you're right. I don't think Elon will be around very much longer, at least on a day-to-day basis.
Was it a good move having him there to begin with?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We desperately needed this, and now people care. I tried to make people care about overlapping government regulatory schemes and waste and fraud and abuse, and it's really hard to do. People care more about the money that the government takes from them than they do and what the government spends. So they care about taxes. They don't really care that much about government spending. It's one of the ways that you get $36 trillion in debt. Elon Musk changed that. Whether or not that was for a short period of time or whether or not people will be focused on this permanently, I think is going to be one of the great legacies, or one of the potential legacies, of the Trump administration if it works out well.
Just turning all right to foreign policy. I mean, two key issues that President Trump inherited, well, there were several issues he inherited, but two big ones, Gaza and Ukraine. Those two conflicts rumble on. Why has there been so little progress?
Well, the Gaza one, I don't think anybody ever said they were going to solve Gaza. I know that Trump floated that trial balloon of, taking over Gaza, having America take over Gaza and make it into sort of an international resort and so forth. I never thought that was a serious proposal. I know how Donald Trump thinks, and he heard that as one idea in a meeting and decided to float it at a press conference and see how it went over. And as a trial balloon, it went over like a lead balloon. So you haven't heard much about that at all. No one's going to solve Gaza in a short period of time. One thing that I think, I was talking with some folks from the Pentagon last week, and they said that, what doesn't get nearly enough attention is how long it's going to take to clear the area of just all the unexploded ordnance. It could take 5 years to do that. So you can imagine the timelines we're talking about, and trying to get Gaza to anything close to stability is going to be difficult. I think everybody knew that going in. I think Ukraine is really where the Trump team is flummoxed. He really did believe he could fix it with a phone call within 24 hours, and that's not happened. I think they really don't know what to do there. They expected Putin to want to do a deal. They expected to be able to make Zelensky want to do a deal. They expected the Europeans to maybe encourage Zelensky to do a deal, and that's clearly not working out. Zelensky really threw a spanner in the works the other day when he said that any deal that would require Ukraine to give up claims to Crimea would be a non-starter. That's never going to happen. And if that's the Ukrainian position, then we really will be at loggerheads, because there's no circumstances that I've seen under which Crimea goes back to being part of Ukraine. I don't even think the Europeans believe that's going to happen. But if the Ukrainians are insisting on it, you could very quickly get to a situation where everybody knows that we might be a long way away from a ceasefire or a lasting peace in Ukraine. And I know that, amongst other things, in dealing with the issue, is frustrating the Trump team to no end.
Yeah, and one of the things that's quite striking is that a lot of the traditional allies of the United States we've been speaking to here at Al Arabiya News have expressed some concern about the Kremlin narrative, the pro-Russia narrative that is being given as an explanation of events there in Ukraine. And that's got a lot of people scratching their heads. I mean, I want to ask you this question. What's in it for America? Why is President Trump attaching so much importance to mending fences with the Kremlin?
For two reasons. First of all, he's always believed that you get you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, and you see him again and again try to be prodded by the media to say nasty things about Putin in public, nasty things about President Xi in China in public, nasty things about Kim Jong-un in North Korea in public, and he simply won't do that. There's no benefit to him. He doesn't perceive any benefit to doing that. He'd much rather have private conversations than beat up on people for the benefit of the media. That's one answer. I think the bigger question, you ask it in the right way, is what's the benefit to mending fences with Russia? And this is a fascinating question. I cannot but help get the feeling, in talking to people who work in the administration, talking to members of Congress, that there is real concern in this country about whether or not continental Europe, I take the Brits out of it, that if France and Germany especially, whether or not they are viable and trustworthy long-term partners for the United States. Keep in mind, there's polling data that you can see and available to you. We're aware of it here in this country that, the next generation of Europeans care more about global warming than they do about nuclear war or geopolitics. How do you deal with that? 30 years on, when the Greta Thunbergs of the world are running governments, are the Germans, are the French, are the Dutch going to be viable partners for the United States, or are we better off trying to figure out a way in a tripolar world of the U.S., Russia, and China, of being closer to Russia and trying to peel them away from their Chinese their partners? I think that's a fascinating discussion that bears a lot of thought in the coming years.
Okay, we're going to wrap up. I just want to ask you before we go, if you're the headmaster and you have to give Mr. President Trump his report card for his first 100 days, A, being excellent, B, satisfactory, C, must do better, what are you giving him for immigration?
Immigration's an A+.
Economy?
C.
Foreign policy?
Incomplete. And
government reforms?
B+, A-, and that's the one I'm very familiar with that. So I think they've done a yeoman's effort on that one.
All right. Sounds like he's averaging a B or a B+. Thank you very much indeed. Mick Mulvaney, former Chief of Staff to President Donald Trump. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Well, let's get more now on President Donald Trump's first 100 days in office in his second term. We can speak to Johanna Maska, the former White House Press Advance Director under President Barack Obama. Johanna, great to have you with us. We heard President Donald Trump in Detroit yesterday characterizing the first 100 days of his second term as being an enormous success. How would you characterize them?
Well, I'm afraid that we don't all agree here in America, which isn't unusual. That happens a lot. But, the crowd was significant. He has, for his base, accomplished a lot. But particularly the immigration video that he played last night at his rally. He played an immigration video that showed Americans detaining, arresting, and deporting people who have been here. And whether they're criminals or not, a lot of Americans will have a lot of fear and frustration that is how this president is portraying the America that we know to be a good America that brings about more peace and more human rights around the world. Of course, Donald Trump believes he's doing that, but, it was quite interesting and fairly depressing, honestly. I wrote a friend and I was like, this is just depressing to watch a president of the United States parade human beings in the way he did.
But President Trump's support base would argue that that's precisely what he was voted in for in this second term. And, the polls suggest people like what he's doing. One poll, a Fox News poll, I should add, says 55% approve, 40% do not approve of the border security efforts being made by Mr. Trump. So he is doing, he would say, what he was asked to do.
Border security, you are 100% right. People are happy that the border is more secure. Now, what we do with the people who are already living in the United States, remember, George Bush tried to solve for immigration. We haven't reformed our immigration process in the entirety of my adult life. There are people here on asylum cases that have been waiting 8-9 years. Their kids have gone through school, and we have not heard those cases. Now, what we do about that population is very different. And Absolutely. If you've got criminals, if you've got gang members, Americans are going to want to see action there. But there is a problem because the cases that we're starting to hear are a mother with a 1-year-old who's still nursing, who President Trump is deporting. So his polling on that particular issue is backsliding, even amongst his fiercest supporters. And remember, it wasn't just immigration. They wanted tariffs because they want manufacturing back to the United States. I mean, I grew up in Galesburg, Illinois. President Obama talked about manufacturing was decimated there. We lost Maytag. That sentiment of wanting those jobs back in America, 100%, they want that. But do they want to see America look like a third world country where we are literally parading our criminals in the streets? No. That's a big distinguishing factor, and I think that's where people believe that Trump has gone too far.
Okay, but would you say that you agree with the outcome? It's just the methodology that you have an issue with?
Not the outcome of deporting people who have been here 20 years. The outcome of a safe and secure border. Remember, President Obama actually had a safe and secure border. Now, when I came out to California, I remember people telling me President Obama was deporter-in-chief. He was deporting significant numbers of people. We were not showing videos at rallies of people being rounded up and deporting. That is a difference. This president is a showman. He always has been. Now, the question is, he can show all of these things. And the border, I will give him that. He has secured, it is a more secure border. But the economy relies on some of these millions of human beings. In California, it's 5% of our population is undocumented. Our economy relies on those people. And so you're already seeing Americans tire of some of the economic things that he's passed, including tariffs, because they are showing significant price increases to the consumer here that already feels the effect of inflation. So you're seeing, because the economy will only further be drained if we lose 5% of our population in California, for example, our farm workers, the prices of those crops are going to go up. And Americans don't have the sentiment for that.
How would you assess the level of consumer confidence in the United States right now?
Well, the polls are showing that it is diminishing. And I'll say when I go to restaurants, it's just, you can see people are not going to restaurants with the frequency that they were. I mean, salons are seeing a decrease. Those are troubling signs. Any president wants to make sure, number one, they have a strong economy. And it is clear that President Trump has always had this position that he believes we need to tariff the world to bring manufacturing back. Now, how long can he actually stomach the effects of that, the effects of consumer confidence, the effects of the increase of, everyday things like pet food. Some of our pet food is manufactured around the world. These increases are hitting American consumers, and that gives them less confidence to do the things like going out to restaurants, going to movies, going to, enjoy small businesses, which he keeps talking about he's going to turn back on in Middle America.
Okay, someone in the Trump administration might answer that by saying, look, we need to fix this issue of the United States being ripped off by other countries. We need to address our trade imbalances. This is going to be some short-term pain for everybody. And as long as everything is sort of back to normal by the midterms, which come around remarkably fast, which are next year, everything will be okay. How do you answer that?
Well, and that's the truth, is the election cycle doesn't always give you time. I remember we were involved in Obamacare, and President Obama said, he didn't care about the political hits he was going to take. He wanted to solve for every 30 seconds we had an American going bankrupt over not having health insurance. And that solution cost him the midterms pretty substantially. With tariffs, I am not the kind of Democrat who says that tariffs can't work. You can't explain away that President Biden kept President Trump's tariffs on China. And I do think that fair trade reciprocal trade that he's talking about is something that Americans would like to see. The problem is, how quickly can these plants actually reshore what are critical minerals that we're missing? Who are their fair trade partners who we can rely on? What does that look like? That's not something that you easily work out before the midterms. I mean, trade deals take multiple years. I remember President Obama trying and using a lot of political capital to try to bring about TPP. He wanted to get that region in Asia on a fair and, the same trading platform so that essentially you could hold China's bad practices to account. That took years, and then it didn't get congressional action and fell apart. And now the U.S., of course, got out. That was, you had both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton against that. And so, you see that to actually get a sustainable long-term trade deal, it takes a lot of time. Will President Trump be able to do that? He certainly has the bluster of being negotiator in chief, but the time is ticking. And you see, so the week that he announced all of these major tariffs, Whirlpool in Iowa announced a layoff of 600 workers, a huge part of their Amana workforce. Now, right now, they've paused those layoffs because they don't know what's going to happen. But you also see some of these companies are trying to buy from places like Canada, and they're not sure what Donald Trump is going to do. If he doesn't give them certainty and soon, that is going to have an effect on the workforce. And that is something, having seen how Obamacare was railed against by the Republicans in the lead up to our midterms, I could see Democrats really making a stand on that and likely winning back both the House and the Senate. And that will make it almost impossible for Donald Trump to go without any objection of Congress and do everything that he wants to do.
Okay, so it sounds like you're concerned about the state of the economy and the direction things are heading in. Let's talk a bit about foreign policy. Those two major conflicts that we've talked a lot about on this channel, Gaza and Ukraine, haven't been fixed quite as quickly as we were promised they would be on the campaign trail. Why do you think that is?
Well, these kinds of things that have lasted many generations are not easily solved by one leader as much as Donald Trump wants to pretend he has a magic wand. Particularly the issue of Gaza, that is an issue in Michigan that drove a lot of voters to vote against Kamala Harris because they didn't like how the Biden administration was handling the conflict. I don't think that the way that President Trump has handled it by offering to basically build Trump Tower there is satisfying that voter base either. Look, I think as much as the voters vote on our engagement in the world, I would say that voters are, number one, concerned about their economic security. When the president says he's going to end the war in Ukraine on day one, he's going to move the goalposts. So now he's saying, well, Putin doesn't want to end the conflict. Of course he doesn't want to end it. He invaded a neighbor. That should have been a given. But, Donald Trump gets away with this stuff. And what will happen is he'll move the goalpost and he'll say that the U.S. isn't going to be involved in that conflict. And the conflict was not widely popular in America. In terms of American boots on the ground, there's absolutely no support. There is support in Congress, but if you go to, Galesburg, Illinois, my hometown, and you start talking to people about the war in Ukraine, they're going to talk to you about the problems in Galesburg, Illinois.
Yeah, but I mean, you've got to hand it to President Trump that he has worked pretty hard these last 101 days, getting people around tables, getting the conversation going. We've seen sort of electric shock therapy being given to the Europeans who've been gathering at multiple opportunities to discuss this. I mean, isn't that what this is all about, is getting the conversation going and keeping it going? And that's what President Trump's been doing.
He's actually very effective at marketing. He's very effective at using the power of the presidency. On actually governing and bringing about deals, his first term was not so successful. I mean, I said I was going to judge this term like I judged the last, not on the first 100 days, but on the last 100 days. The last 100 days when all of his his team was in place and they did not control a global pandemic, that was pretty terrible. Turning on PPP, which saw massive fraud and abuse, more money than was spent in the war in Ukraine, those kinds of things were pretty terrible. Now, I am one who's always going to be open-minded. I have a lot of friends who have worked closely with President Trump and still do. I see and I root for the President of America's success. I see him working very hard. But the question is he listening sometimes to the advisors who are telling him, you can say you want to do things very quickly. Bernie Sanders says he wants to turn on Medicaid for all tomorrow. But sometimes that shock to the system is so severe, it will actually have a backlash effect on what you want to do. And I'm afraid that Donald Trump may find himself in that situation. And again, I think Democrats need to speak better to what they want to do to bring manufacturing, especially critical manufacturing, back to the United States, because that's incredibly crucial for our economy. But I would say right now, consumers are already grading Donald Trump, and the grade is not an A for his first 100 days, despite the action.
Okay, I'm going to be picking up on the grading in just a moment. But obviously, we haven't heard a huge amount from the Democratic Party. We're going to hear from Kamala Harris today for the first time, really, in 101 days. I mean, who do you think is going to be up against President Trump, if indeed he runs for a third term in 2028, which he's sort of toyed with the idea of, although one expert we spoke to a little earlier said he's just trying to goad and taunt the Democratic Party. But who do you think is going to be running for your party, for the Democratic Party in 2028?
I hope that our candidate is a fresh face, a fresh voice, someone much younger than our candidates have been. I was part of Barack Obama's campaign defeating Hillary Clinton at the earliest days in Iowa, and I know what it's like to go up against a more establishment candidate, and that is very difficult. And we will likely see a lot of people running for president. I mean, Gavin Newsom already is. Every day he sits out here in California, doing town halls and his new podcast. He is going to run for president, no doubt about it. Ro Khanna, who's in California, I think actually stands a better chance because Ro Khanna, who's a congressman, he's got more of the populist sentiment. He was raised in the Midwest. He was in our Commerce Department for President Obama. He's someone who you can see already because he's doing bus tours that he's certainly interested. Wes Moore is another name. He's the governor of Maryland. He's someone who has always had those kinds of ambitions and is a very outside the box candidate. Now, Maryland is another state like California where they had a surplus and they turned it to a deficit. I don't want to see that. Gretchen Whitmer is someone who is actually in the state of Michigan. She's been governor of Michigan, has actually pretty forcefully led a robust Democratic coalition that has grown in that state. You'll likely see Andy Beshear, who is the governor of Kentucky. He's likely going to jump in, and he, again, lower profile, but someone who has crossed party lines and really gotten things done with Republicans. So I could go on and on.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see so many people in this race that what we really need is a state like Iowa in the early stage that's affordable for these candidates to compete. And right now, my frustration with the Democratic Party is we have actually removed Iowa as first in the nation. And I think that was a major mistake.
Okay, well, if President Trump runs for a third term, then President Barack Obama is entitled to come back and serve his third term, isn't he? Let's move back to President Trump more specifically, because we haven't got much time left. I just want to ask you what you make of the Department of Government Efficiency and the cost savings. I mean, wasn't that kind of cost saving long overdue?
So we had sequestration during the Obama administration. There have been many efforts to decrease government spending. And it is always complicated because you don't know what you're going to cut. And as has been seen with the Trump administration, a lot of the things that they've cut very quickly have actually had to be turned back on. There are costs to that. Whether they're actually saving money is a real question. I can tell you that with sequestration, we had to save money and we did. So yes, I am a fiscal conservative. I want to make sure that every one of our tax dollars is going to the rightful place, and we should be looking at every single tax dollar. What Elon Musk and his, minions using AI are doing is a very different thing than actually going through line by line and looking at the effectiveness of a program.
Okay, so just to sort of wrap up your assessment of President Trump, as promised, I'd like to get the report card out and ask you to pretend to be the school headmistress, Principal Maska. What grade are you giving? A being the best, B being satisfactory, C must do better. What grade are we giving the president for immigration?
Oh, goodness. I would give him a D, not because of border security. If the question was border security, that would be different. But on immigration, he has not actually come up with a plan that's going to solve our backlog of asylum cases, our backlog of long-term immigration,
Okay.
you know, the problems that we've got that are systemic. He could still do that, but he has not.
I was expecting a better grade than D. What about the economy?
Well, again, I'm afraid that on the economy, it's probably a C. There are people who think that in what he's doing, you are going to see more American manufacturing goods sold. If that comes true, then it should move to an A. But right now, prices are going up for American consumers. Businesses have absolutely no certainty because of how he's playing this out. And so we're kind of in a wait and see moment of whether this is going to be failing or if he's going to rise to an A.
Foreign policy?
Well, his Secretary of Defense accidentally added a reporter to a signal chat in which he gave the details around a Houthi attack. So I'd probably have to say on that one, we're kind of sitting at a D or a C. I mean, you've got him certainly asserting a stronger position. I am not against him actually holding China accountable on the Panama Canal. I think that's long overdue and important for us to go against what China was doing in getting all of these ports. So I like those kinds of things, but I can't possibly give a B or an A grade to an administration that accidentally added a reporter to a signal chat. Had we done that, every day Fox News would have hit us over the head.
All right, just lastly, government reform. What grade are we giving him?
Well, he has reformed government. Will it actually benefit the American people? That's a very different question. So I guess when it comes to, you know, if it's just a matter of did he reform government? He has. It's like probably a B, but I don't know that the American people are actually going to like cuts to our Department of Education. And you're already seeing that with town halls with Democrats, including Bernie Sanders and AOC, even in Idaho, flooded with tens of thousands of people.
Okay, well, you've definitely been the strictest school principal that we've spoken to on this program today. Really appreciate it. A real pleasure. Johanna Maska, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Great to join you.
Well, that is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Until then, bye-bye.